I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, this is the Lexus RC350, and today I'm going to explain why I reckon this car is underrated. The Lexus RC350 is just the latest in a really long line of pretty sexy two-door Lexus sports cars. Now, Lexus make all sorts of cars. They've got sedans, they've got SUVs, and they've always had a two-door in their lineup, more or less. It started with the SC way back in the 1990s. That was a car that, had another generation around the 2000 mark and was pretty interesting looking. And the RC has been available on the Australian market for 4 or 5 years now. Over that time, it's had a couple of nips and tucks, and the latest facelift I actually think is quite good looking, particularly in this interesting celestial blue color that has quite a nice fleck in it when you get up close and personal. But the looks are one thing. What the RC350 actually stands for is quite another, because you used to be able to get a luxurious 6-cylinder coupe from virtually any of the luxury automakers. Now, it's really rare. You can get a BMW 4 Series, an Audi A5 or a Mercedes C-Class with plenty of turbo 4s, or you can get really hotted up versions with 6 and 8-cylinder motors. But in the Lexus RC, you can still get a big block 3.5 litre V6 in luxury spec. I mean, look at these 18-inch wheels. There's sidewall around them in those tyres. You just know this car isn't going to be rock hard. Not to mention the really nice colour combination on this particular RC350 Luxury. Luxury is what Lexus actually calls their base models, but this isn't really a base model. Like most vehicles in the Lexus lineup, even the entry grade car gets pretty much everything you'd want on a vehicle like this. And in my opinion, this is actually a bit of an enthusiast spec. I mentioned the high profile tyres with decent sidewall that makes this car really appropriate for Australian back roads that tend to be torn up, but we also have kind of the minimum viable equipment for a luxury two-door. There's no sunroof, for example. Now, I quite like a sunroof on my day-to-day cars, but on a sporty car, you kind of don't want to be putting too much weight up top. We also have, really nice seats. We've got a decent stereo. We've got a nice instrument panel and interior, but, it's not kind of overly flash. Everything is where you'd want it to be, everything's comfortable, and the quality is immensely good. I mean, it's a Lexus, but it's kind of not over the top and flashy, and I think, in a way, that's actually quite endearing. Now, the colour combination on this particular car is obviously designed to get a bit of attention. The celestial blue outside is kind of like a nice smurfy sort of blue, but I think it works. And then in here we have this honey-coloured leather, which is unusual. It's not really a colour that you see on most of this car's rivals, although Lexus do offer a range of colours that you can choose inside this car. But this combination is kind of interesting, and it also reminds me a bit of that halo spec on the new BMW M4 with the blue and yellow leather inside, but I think Lexus have actually done it a little bit nicer. Now, the technology package in this car is starting to get a bit dated. We do have a nice high-res screen up here, controlled by the Lexus trackpad. You'll have to imagine Lexus will give this car a touch screen at some point, whether in a facelift or an all-new RC at some stage. And then in front of the driver, we have very handsome analog gauges, but no digital speedo. And in a country full of speed cameras, that's a big oversight. In higher grade models, you get a head-up display with a digital speedo, but this base car doesn't get that. What we do get though, good stereo, plenty of electric adjustment in the seat, also standard seat heating and cooling, which is not something you'll find at this level in one of this car's rivals. And I say this level because this car is 70 grand, which is very good value for a luxury two-door. At this price, you'll be getting into an entry-level 4-cylinder in one of the German cars that will be nowhere near the sonorous quality of the V6 you get in this vehicle. Now, it's all screwed together nicely, material quality is right up there. Practicality is okay, decent sized cup holders, big tray between the seats, flock lined, always good to see. The door bins are tiny, however, and there's absolutely no storage up here just to kind of pop a phone or something, so I found myself putting everything in the cup holders all the time. Now, this is a 4-seater. You get 2 tiny seats in the back. You could use them very occasionally if you had to, but I don't think you'd want to be relying on the RC that much as family transport, but as a second car, this would be stylish. As the RC kind of takes the profile of a two-door sedan more than anything else, you actually do get a reasonably sized boot. Opens up like a sedan, and you can see here I've got the Chasing Cars large suitcase. That just slides out nice and easily. We've also got all of our camera gear in here because there's not a huge amount of space in the back of this car. But point is, you know, to get to the airport or something like that, the RC350 really has all the practicality that you'll need. Underneath that boot floor, there's also a spare wheel, which is always good to see in a country like Australia. Boot closes nice and easily, and we get this attractive rear end. Because this is the base car, we don't really get any sort of spoiler arrangement. Not that it really needs one. Nice crisp tail lights, they were a recent change for the car. So it's good looking, it's luxurious, it's high quality, it's cheaper than most of its rivals. Let's see how it stacks up from the driver's seat, which in a car like this is pretty important. But first, what does the RC cost to run? Well, you get 3 capped services from Lexus every year, or 15,000 kilometers for this car, and each of the 3 will cost you $495, which is pretty much par for the course for this segment, maybe a little bit cheaper than average. Fuel consumption, it's a naturally aspirated V6. It's going to be a little thirstier than some rivals, particularly in town, where I got 10 litres per 100 Ks in this car, but on the highway you can get it down to about 7.5 litres per 100 Ks without trying, so I think that's pretty good. And in terms of warranty, Lexus have a 4-year warranty in Australia, which used to be best in class for luxury, but Mercedes have now moved to a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, and so that's something which Lexus should probably address sometime in the next couple of years. So I started this video by explaining that I thought the Lexus RC350 was kind of underrated. And that's true in many ways. I think it's a good looking car, I think it's a comfortable, well finished car inside, but I also think the way it drives just doesn't really get the credit that it deserves. For a lot of people, the RC is pretty much unknown, but they've definitely heard of the Mercedes C-Class Coupe or a BMW 4 Series, for example. And while there are elements of the RC experience that aren't quite up to the same standards as those cars, for example, there's not a huge amount of low-end torque in the RC350, even though you can get a 2-litre turbo 4-cylinder in this car if you want. Many aspects of the driving experience are quite superior in the Lexus to those cars, particularly at the price, because the RC350 Luxury I'm driving is just over $70,000 before on-road costs. Now, it's a bit of a cheat code variant in the lineup actually, because most people buying an RC go for the RC350 F Sport, which is more sportily styled, it has bigger wheels, but it's $8,000 more expensive despite sharing the exact same basic mechanical package. And as we talked about in the interior, the RC350 Luxury with no options is still really well equipped. So personally, I would save that $8,000 because, well, on these slightly smaller wheels, the RC350 Luxury also has awesome compliance on Australian roads. It's actually a really, really well set up car. Now, I don't own a Lexus or a Toyota, but I do drive all of this car's rivals, and I was just taken aback at how good it still feels. But a bit like Mazda, Lexus have embarked on a program in the last few years of really constant improvement. So almost, pretty much every 12 months, there'll be a round of mechanical changes that go more or less unannounced in the cars. But over the years since the RC launched, it's benefited from several rounds of these little modifications that have just made it better and better to drive each time, correcting little things that weren't quite right when the vehicle launched and just, knocking it up a few points here and there. Now, what hasn't fundamentally changed is the engine, which is a 3.5 litre direct injected petrol V6, naturally aspirated. Yeah, okay, it doesn't have turbochargers, but it still has plenty of power and lots of get up and go and a good sound. It makes 232 kilowatts of power, 380 newton meters of torque. So that torque, as a plain number, is still, pretty similar to what you'll get in a turbocharged 4-cylinder rival of this car. But being a Atmo V6, it is made higher up in the rev range. So the RC350 encourages you to rev it out a bit. Thankfully, this is a great V6 engine. It's silky, it's smooth, and it sounds good. And the fact is, because you do have to work it that little bit harder, you can actually tap into this car's performance in more spaces than you can in a super torquey turbocharged engine. It's one of those cars where even just accelerating to the speed limit in a 60 or 80 zone, you can afford to have a little bit of fun. It still has enough low-end grunt that you can just cruise on light throttle if you want, but you are able to be a little bit more aggressive on throttle in this car than in others without breaking the speed limit, if that makes sense. Now, I don't want to give the impression it's a slouch, because it isn't, You know, it still feels like probably about a 6.5 second car to 100 by the seat of my pants, maybe a touch more rapid, but it's kind of got usable performance on Australian roads, which is nice. The other thing that deserves a mention about the powertrain in the RC350 is the gearbox, because the 8-speed auto has been pretty comprehensively reworked in the recent past for this car, which is a good thing because the shifts in the past were not always perfect. While they were relatively slick and smooth, the gearbox tended to hunt a little bit for ratios. That has been banished with an entirely new software tune that is really effective actually. Far more intuitive, knows what gear to be in, and importantly responds pretty much immediately to your custom demands through the paddle shifters. Then there's the ride and handling, which are really supple. And one thing Lexus have done well in this car is that the control surfaces, be it the throttle, the brake, or the steering, they all have a very consistent weight. So you get into the car and you start to get that really nice and rare feeling of the car truly flowing with you quite early on. And some other cars in this segment can be a little isolating or a little disconnected, but the RC I think feels good. I mean, the steering is a little bit, I don't know, a little bit digital and video gamey at times, but the weighting of it is right. And you know, it has that consistency of surfacing to the other control surfaces of the car. And the steering is predictable. You can plot a really good line through a corner. And the amount of grip available is adequate, but not crazy. We're on Bridgestone Turanza tires, which certainly have enough grip, but you can also start moving the car around on a good sporty road and really feeling the balance of it. It does weigh 1,700 kilos, which is a little heavy, though not out of the ordinary for a two-door coupe of this size. But you can absolutely move it around on throttle, position it just so in the corner, and start kind of moving up in terms of plateaus of driving the car. And there is sort of something for everyone in terms of driving enthusiasm, which is a nice thing to have. The ride quality is excellent. We're on 18-inch wheels rather than the 19s of the F Sport. That's a good thing. The suspension itself, the dampers, really well tuned. We do have adaptive damping. It does notably firm up in sport. I just drive it in normal, which I think feels really well suited to Australian roads. It's also quiet, it's hushed. There are a few areas though where, you know, there are some kind of low-hanging fruit that you'd hope Lexus would have got to by now. No digital speedo, for example, is dumb in a country like Australia. You do, of course, get used to using the analog speedo again, but you know, in terms of a precise reading, it's better to have something digital. The lane centering is not as good as in an Audi A5, for example, or a BMW 4 Series, although you do have things like AEB, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic, adaptive cruise. That's all standard fit. You do get a reversing camera as well, though not a 360 degree. But all in all, it's a nice driver's package that's really high quality. You know, if you want to buy a car that still has an atmospheric V6, has sky-high build quality, and is luxurious to ride in, your options are seriously limited. But the Lexus RC, and of course the IS 4-door, is one of those options, and you wouldn't feel shortchanged driving this car every day. In fact, I think you'd really enjoy it. So those are my opinions of the 2021 Lexus RC350. Honestly, there's a lot to like about this car. If you want something that is sporty, rear drive, has Toyota quality, and looks pretty good as well, you could do really well with an RC. Certainly you'll have to spend a lot more on this car's German rivals, which can't offer you an old school Atmo V6. So if that package sounds good to you, then, I mean, this is a nice recipe, what can I say? Keen to know your thoughts though, let me know down below the video. Is an RC something you would consider? Do these two-door coupes even mean anything to you anymore, or are you fully aboard the SUV bandwagon? You can let me know. While you're down there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell if you haven't already. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.